He had fast cars and fast boats too. He liked them.
Oh yes, yeah. John had the very first Corvette that was manufactured by General Motors, and he had when Corvette introduced its 50th anniversary model, John was the first one to get the fastest Corvette there was. He also, I believe, had 3 Bentleys, including the latest Bentley coupe that was a super fast car. And John was a legendary speedster up at Big Bear Lake. He built the fastest boats, and one of the great pictures of John was taken by his wife as he is flying by the front of their Big Bear house, and John is smiling at Lucia, saying, "I've just been shot in the ass with luck," and he's going by at 60 or 70 miles an hour, and yeah, he loved fast cars and fast boats. That was John Myers.
Now, he used to have a saying about sticking his head out the window.
Well, he used to refer to a term that you got to kind of let it all hang out now and then. And I think in the days when you go back to actually flying in open cockpits, you kind of stretching your head out a little bit just to be damn sure you're seeing where you're going. And so he used that term even when he got into pure jets, and you weren't sticking your head out of the window in a jet. But he used that term that you kind of had to stick your head out of the window to get right on the edge. And that's just, you just push yourself a little bit further than the next guy.
Janice was saying that every time somebody came to him for advice, he would just say, "Go for it," to go for it.
Yeah, well, that was one of his comments. He knew I had been looking to buy an airplane for a very, very long time. And I'm so cheap, I would always bum my rides from all my buddies, Clay Lacey and Barron Hilton and John Myers. And so I said, what the hell do I need an airplane for when I could go for free with you guys? And so when I finally bought, I had a partnership in an airplane. John wanted me to get the Citation 10 because it was the fastest airplane there was, and it's a pilot's airplane. The other one that the pilots loved to fly was the Falcon 50, the 3-engine jet that will climb faster than just about anything else. And so if it wasn't a Falcon or a Citation 10, John was saying you get a puddle jumper then or something like that. So, but he loved to. I think he just loved going along with me.
Can you think of a proud moment with him or a special moment that really?
Well, I think the proudest moments I could ever remember about John is when I introduced him to somebody that did not know him. And it wasn't long before, excuse me, I'll get this. Hello. Hey, Jimmy, how are you? Well, fine. I'm in my museum here with a film crew. I'm being interviewed and filmed regarding the life of my good friend John Myers, who's subject to a documentary. Yes, I am, and we didn't, because I don't think you need reservations anywhere anymore. But yeah, that'd be fine. There's a lady that is wanted to join us for dinner, an Irene that I met at the opening of the BOA, and she was going to meet me at Timothy Yarger's art studio. But he arrived today from Bangkok, and he was late, and he was so tired, he put the meeting off till tomorrow. But I said, well, she's on her way by here now, and her name is Irene. She's a very pretty woman, and she was telling me that she's not getting along with her husband. I'm sure she's got her own agenda, but anyway, she's on her way over, and when she gets here, I'll have her follow me over to your place. Don't worry, I'll bring it. I will bring it. Yeah, no, don't worry, I'll bring it. And Susan, depending on this other lady's agenda, Susan has this beautiful model that the gal that's been on 7,000 magazine and book covers, Cindy Geyer. You can Google, if you Google her, you see the most beautiful woman you ever saw. And she's Susan's model friend from New York. And she's out here. She did an interview with one of the big TV companies. They want to give her a television program. And she spent the night last night in Malibu. But a gorgeous woman. Anyway, we may hook up with them sometime too. Well, I don't know. Shit. I think there's going to be no problem with getting reservations. So I would think. Well, okay, then make it for 5, and then if there's only 3 of us, then we'll still be okay. All right. Bye. Yeah. That's Jack Nicholson's closest friend, Jim Boyer. He's a great pal of mine.
And they had some people had nicknames for Mr. Meyer? Well,
he called himself Skinhead. And I think that's because he had a couple of airplane crashes, and he actually skinned up the top of his head. But I'm sure there were other nicknames as well. But I think he, enduring himself, Skinhead was what he liked.
Some people call him Maestro, or
could be the Maestro, yeah. That as a this Maestro. How that came about? When my proudest moment, to answer for sure, is where I introduced John to somebody that he did not know, but of someone who knew about him. And the stories that John would tell about his life to people that hadn't heard these stories before, I mean, it didn't make any difference how famous somebody was. Hearing the stories from John about Howard Hughes or John Northrop, Kelly Johnson, I mean, these legendary people in the history of aviation, John knew everybody. So that was probably what made me most proud, because being the guy that's 10 to 15 years younger than all these other legends was, and to be in the crowd where I'm considered as close a friend as John has, that has to be, that's the combination of why one had so much respect for this man. And me being the youngest person in that inside crowd, that has to be just a personal amount of pride that's I can't measure with any other person.
Did he talk about when he crashed? Sometimes he had those crashes.
He did, but I never really got into that too much.
He had some close calls.
Yeah, he had some close calls, but he walked away from all of them, and he made comments about it, but that's kind of like what happens when you put your head out of the window. You're on the edge. So but the reality is that John was a God-fearing man, and God protected him, and he took him at the right time when he needed a test pilot up there in heaven. And I have this beautiful, lasting memories of my relationship with him.
He was a good guy.
Oh, a great guy. Absolutely the best. I mean, I would pick John up virtually every Thanksgiving, and he would come over here, or I'd have Janice and her husband Ernie pick him up and bring him over here. I never had a birthday that I didn't celebrate that John wasn't with me. There was never a Christmas. There was never a Christmas Eve that I didn't pick John up and take him to Baron Hilton's house. So and particularly after he gave up driving a car, he would sometimes still drive to LA Country Club. But I said to him, "Why do you drive at all? I'll just pick you up." And so the places that he would frequent would be Barron's home in Palm Springs. John was always a welcome guest anywhere, and Barron always had a big Super Bowl party, always had a big New Year's Eve party, and John was always at Barron's parties. Interesting story about Barron and John. Barron's airplane is called a Citation 5 Ultra, and it's about the same cockpit as John's Citation 2, only it's faster and it has more range. Well, on one particular fishing season, where Barron would fly back and forth to Alaska several times a year, and he would, several times during the fishing season, he would, we are partners, Barron and I are partners in a fishing boat. It's really a magnificent yacht. It's 120 feet long. And this one summer, Barron's airplane had to go in for a major inspection. And that meant it was not going to be available to be flown for 3 months. So John gave his airplane to Barron. And that's kind of the side of the generosity that now Barron could have always had access to airplanes from his Hilton Hotel Corporation, but that's not John just wanted him to use his airplane. And during that summer, John and I had several of our greatest moments together, and it started with me driving my pickup truck up to Venice Island, where, when you think about a man who, John never had to drive anywhere farther than Palm Springs because he flew everywhere. And so on this summer, where John and I drove to Venice Island on 3 or 4 different occasions. That's a trip that will take 8 hours. So we leave in the morning, and we would stop. And on one trip, we stopped in Burbank, and I had purchased a couple hundred pianos that were used in my business in Shakey's Pizza. And we always had banjo players and piano players working at Shakey's. And I bought them from the same man. All 200 pianos I bought from a man named Charles Crenshaw, whose family, his grandfather, is what Crenshaw Boulevard in Los Angeles is named after. And the one thing that Charlie Crenshaw had in common with John Myers is they were both the same age. And so on this 92nd or 93rd year of John's life, I introduced him to Charlie Crenshaw, and Charlie can play the piano like Liberace. The guy's unbelievable. So I found out that Charlie was I think he was about 3 months older than John. And I said, "John, you're just a kid. Charlie Crenshaw is 3 months older than you are." Well, we drove with this piano all the way to Venice Island. I'm sad to say, I wanted to learn to play the piano again. I played as a child. In fact, I played at Carnegie Hall and when I was 11 years old. And I loved to play the piano in my years in college. And then I stopped playing, and I haven't played in 50-some years. But John and I would stop. We'd go through towns that he would want to use the restroom frequently. That's a common thing when people get older and they get swollen prostates, so they have to stop and relieve themselves. And it didn't make any difference where we were. Somebody would find out that John Myers was stopping. And his ranch, which is an interesting. John joined the board of trustees of the University of California at Merced. John gave 5,000 acres to the University of California and then sold them 5,000 acres. So right on the border of John's ranch was this enormous city being built that's going to house 40,000 students and teachers. And he would say, I was just shotting the ass with luck, because here he took a cattle ranch into, a very, very major. So as we would stop in little towns, and on one particular stop, it was for the 4th of July weekend, where Barron hosts the fireworks show at Venice Island, and there's always a big family dinner the night before the fireworks, the lunch that day, and then a big dinner that night. So John and I stopped at a little stand where two women were unloading what must have been, I'll bet, 2 tons of produce, any kind of produce you could imagine. And they are stacking this produce on this truck that's got like it looked like a bleacher in a stadium. So they would pile the fruit on top of the seats of this old truck. And John and I started buying watermelons and cantaloupe and corn and beans and peaches, and I mean everything that was grown in the fields up there. Well, we got the pickup truck full. We must have had, with the piano, we probably had 1,000 pounds of this fresh fruit that we were driving to the island. And I went to pay this lady for it, and she had it all added up, and I think we spent like $80. Well, I said, $80? I mean, we're buying, I can't believe that. I thought this would be $400 or $500. John gave the ladies $100 a piece tip. And they had never seen anything like this. And I said, ladies, they were both divorced women who were putting children through school. And so as a summer job, they stacked this produce that they would buy in the fields and then sell it on this roadside stand. And I said to the ladies, I said, has anybody in your life ever given you a $100 tip? And they said, no, sir, I've never received a tip in my life. And I said, well, not only are you getting both a $100 tip, you're getting a tip from one of the most famous men who's ever lived. And I'll tell you about him. Have you heard of Charles Lindbergh? And of course, everybody knows who Charles Lindbergh is. This man saved his life right here. This is John Myers. And by the time, they would have both made love with John if they could have right then, because he just wowed them.
He had sort of charisma about him too.
Oh, remarkable. Yeah, he just had a remarkable amount of self-confidence as a person, and he made others feel the same way about themselves.
Did he play golf or?
I'm sure he did, but the fact that I've actually, that's a cute story about me. I bought Howard Hughes' membership in one of 3 clubs that Howard Hughes was a member of. He was a member of Lakeside, where I bought his membership. He was a member of Wilshire Country Club and a member of the Los Angeles Country Club. And Hughes stopped playing golf after he tied the course record at Riviera. And Riviera, back in the 30s, was where the U.S. Open was held. And he tied the course record. And he made an announcement at the bar after buying everybody drinks, and John Myers could have well been one of the people there, that he was going to turn over his empire to Noah Dietrich, and he was going to become a professional golfer. And his teaching pro went over to him and said, "Howard, that is a bad idea." And Howard said, "Well, why? Here, I've just tied the course record." He said, "Howard, let me tell you, you don't have the temperament to be a professional golfer." And maybe, Howard, this is the hardest thing that maybe I've ever told you, but I don't think you have the real talent and the discipline to be a professional golfer. Howard Hughes walks outside and gets his clubs. He brings them back in and says, "I won't need these," and he never once picked up a club again as long as he lives. So he was an idiosyncrasy. And another story about Howard that I always loved to tell. When I opened his locker, Gene Autry, Bob Hope were my sponsors, with a legendary amateur golfer named Roger Kelly. And I opened the locker. The locker was last opened in 1936. There was a single magazine in there naming Howard Hughes Man of the Year in 1936. And he had set the roundest world speed record solo, and Time Magazine named him Man of the Year. So when the Time Magazine has come out to officially interview this legendary aviator, and they said, "Mr. Hughes, would you tell us what your ambitions in life are?" And Hughes said, "Well, I want to continue advanced aviation photography, pioneering in the motion picture industry." He owned RKO Studios, so he had the platform to film beautiful women. He even designed, I was told, Jane Russell's bra in the movie Outlaw. And he had a long-time love affair with Jane Russell, along with a lot of other famous women. And so he said he was going to continue this motion picture research and become the best-known director, producer in the motion picture industry. And then he said he wanted to be known as America's richest man. And number 3, he was going to continue to pioneer aviation research with his Hughes Aircraft Company. But number 4 is where the interviewer just fell off the chair when he said he wanted to be the first amateur golfer to turn pro and win the U.S. Open. And that's the one thing he did not accomplish in his life. But I gave my magazine to Jack Rather, and Jack built the exhibit for the Spruce Goose that is now, I believe, somewhere in Evergreen, Washington. But when I gave it to him, it was in the cockpit of the Spruce Goose with Howard Hughes' mannequin when he flew the Spruce Goose in Long Beach Harbor in World War II to prove that it would fly.
I think it's still up there. It's in Oregon, I think.
Yeah.
Did now Howard Hughes and John Marley knew each other?
Oh, very well. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I think the only reason that Howard didn't work for. Okay. Hello. I can. Yep. I thought Myrna was here, but I'll open it for you. They knew one another very well. And Howard would be a man that would have had enormous respect for and probably knowing Hughes because of his massive ego, he probably was very jealous of John Myers because John worked for the 2 most famous people that would have been Hughes's competitors, John Northrup and Kelly Johnson. And the fact that he didn't work for Hughes probably pissed Hughes off because, and he would have worked for Hughes. He did do some work for Hughes, but only when Lucia dressed him down. Howard Hughes had never been talked like that by anybody before, and Lucia just dressed him down, told him, "Don't call back, because if you don't call during hours that my husband's awake."
Thank you very much for taking the time.
Okay.
Awesome, very much. Thank you.